Wrap up this episode by talking about the winners and losers of this preseason game. Winners, for me, I'm going to say the quarterbacks and linebackers. I think they far outperformed way better than I had originally thought, specifically the linebackers, considering I had a lot of depth questions for that position group. And I'm going to throw safeties in there too, because I really thought there were just no names behind these guys. And, again, it's preseason. We only have this little instance of like game data to reference off to jump with or to reference, but I I thought the safeties looked good. I thought the linebackers looked real good. And I think the quarterbacks did their thing and showed the NFL like, hey, the Bills have a pretty good quarterback room. Who are your winners?
Yeah, I'd agree. I can't put all the running backs in, but Singletary's got to get a little tip of the hat for me as far as the winners go. Um, Breida he didn't wow me. Antonio Williams had the fumble and it was on the play where he got injured, so I won't put too much stock into it.
Mm-hmm.
But at least seeing Singletary out there, he looks faster. He looks like he's running with a little bit better vision. He looks like he's ready to go this season. I'm excited to see Moss get back out there, but Singletary was encouraging. And then I'm stealing one of your losers and I'm putting it into a winner category. Bobby Hart, you made it through a roster cut. I don't know how, but you're a winner this week for that.
Oh man, the losers category, of course, and I guess I that makes a lot of sense, Bobby Hart. You're not really a loser. It's just you just squeaked by again. So
I don't know if you saw this one. Vince over on the Built Buffalo Network on Twitter had a quote from Bobby Hart. It was from 2017. Bobby Hart
best
saying
right
that
tackle.
he was the best right tackle in the league. And I'm like, Jesus Christ. No, you're not.
Yeah.
Sorry, Bobby. I don't know you personally, but he has to
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, well, I'm unfortunately gonna have to keep him in the loser category here. I I'm blown away that he didn't get cut, but I understand why he didn't get cut at the same time. But I I literally I started off this episode, where I talked about the training camp and I was I referenced how, Deion Dawkins, still hasn't really done a full practice. Can you imagine if Bobby Hart made this roster? Like, just stop and think about that real quick, Justin. Like, for those of you who can't see, Justin made like a real repulsed face, and I think that just pretty much encompasses my thoughts in general. And before we get into, I don't want to get into this again too much, just because I've referenced Bobby Hart and my disdain for him like 3 or 4 times now. So it's clear and evident that he ain't it. But my other losers from this for this preseason game has to be the cornerbacks. They just, again, were very inexperienced, and it showed out there. All the pass interference, getting burned. I mean, we're talking about Wild Goose. Like, the man was a cooked goose, not wild. He was just cooked. Like, it was bad. And the wide receivers, specifically towards the bottom of the roster, I know I mentioned this earlier, but fringe roster wide receivers in this organization have it bad. It's a tough wide receiver room to make on the 53-man roster, and that's because we're wide receiver centric offense, and unfortunately, players like Isaiah Hodgins didn't do anything out there, and that's because he got hurt. And the top of the roster wide receivers were either sitting out or they got the benefit of Mitchell Trubisky handing the ball off to Devin Singletary until Davis Webb came in, and then the lower tier wide receivers came in and showed why they were lower tier wide receivers.
Yeah, I agree with your wide receivers here. For part of it, it's not even totally their fault. You know,
Oh yeah.
sometimes when you get into these camp battles, like maybe you're on a lot of teams, maybe you'd be duking it out for like a fourth
Duke.
spot, Duke. And it like if you can't seal up that fourth spot, like well maybe you can round out the depth chart at like 5 or 6. Like 1 through 5 is pretty locked up right now, and seeing what I saw from the other returners, McKenzie's pretty much a lock at this point. So you have some talented wide receivers here that really need to set themselves apart from like 5, 6 other dudes for one spot, and that's including making some plays in preseason. At that spot on the roster, you have to be a special teams contributor in probably more than one way, and like all the other things of looking at you if you're ready to be the next man up and all that going into it. So like Isaiah Hodgins for me, he might be good enough to be wide receiver 5, 6 on 80% of the teams in the league. But what we've seen so far, it's probably not enough to cut it as the last receiver on this team right now.
Yeah, if you're a lower tier wide receiver or lower on the depth chart rather on this team, your final boss is basically Jake Kumerow, who's got special team versatility and has been showing out
Plus the hair.
in training camp. And he's got a sick nickname, Touchdown Jesus. Like, just cut yourself. Like,
Yeah, that's got to count for at least like 2 points if you're doing like a pro con column. Like
yeah,
touchdown Jesus has to get 2 points.
yeah. I told myself I wouldn't fall for the training camp darling, and I'm trying really hard not to. But we'll see what happens.